Hello, Kentucky Royal Ambassadors. This is John Otten, the RA consultant for Kentucky WMU and Kentucky Baptist. And it's time for our Campcraft lesson for this week. It has been raining here where I live, and so I have planned a lesson that I can do inside. And it has to do with identifying harmful animals. In the nature section of the hiker patch, one of the requirements is the identification of 2 harmful animals. Now, when we talk about harmful animals, many people will think of snakes. Not all snakes are harmful, venomous, poisonous, but several are. And being able to identify the poisonous snakes in your area can help keep you safe when hiking and camping. In our Campcraft manual, I've showed you this before. It can be found at kywmu.org/campcraft. On page 67 in the nature chapter in our Campcraft manual, we can read about 4 types of venomous snakes: rattlesnakes, copperheads, cottonmouths, and coral snakes. Now in Kentucky, we don't have coral snakes, but we do have pygmy rattlesnakes, and they're in that group of rattlesnakes. We have western rattlesnakes and pygmy rattlesnakes. In addition to this page in the Campcraft manual, that's a good starter for learning about poisonous snakes, I have also found another really good resource. It's called the Kentucky Snake Book. It's produced by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it can be downloaded for free. I'm going to give you the website address, fw.ky.gov/wildlife/documents/kysnakebook.pdf. Now that's a lot to remember, to write down, and honestly the easiest way to get to this downloadable PDF is to simply search the phrase Kentucky Snake Book, and it'll come up as your first hit on your search. So you can go and download that book. It's perfectly free, and it's a great resource. And I'm going to share my screen with you today and show you a few of the pages out of that book as we talk about identifying poisonous snakes. So there's page 5 in the Kentucky Snake Book, and it gives you some great things to look for to identify poisonous snakes. I'm going to kind of summarize this page and the next page. And from these pages, we learn, first of all, that Kentucky venomous snakes are all pit vipers. And so they all have a pit or an opening between their eyes and their nostrils. And if you can see my cursor there, and you can see where they've highlighted the pit in this drawing of this poisonous snake. The other thing you'll notice is that the poisonous or venomous snakes have a vertical pupil. That's the dark part in the eye. And as you can see in that drawing there, you have a vertical pupil. Now, look down at this drawing here. The pupil in this non-venomous snake is round. So poisonous snakes, vertical; non-poisonous, round. Another thing that identifies a poisonous snake and a non-poisonous snake is the scales on the bottom. If you look on the tail end of a snake, below what's called the anal plate, the poisonous snakes will have a single row of scales, whereas the non-poisonous snakes will have a double row of scales. Now, a lot of people think that the head shape, a triangular head shape, always indicates a poisonous snake, and that's a good identifier, but not all snakes with a triangular head are poisonous. There are some harmless snakes that have a slightly triangular shaped head, and some of them will even kind of flatten their head to make it more of that shape. Other people will talk about the rattling of the tail. And of course, rattlesnakes do that, but there are some non-poisonous, harmless snakes that will vibrate their tail very quickly. And if they're in dry leaves or dry grass, it will make a sound that is very similar to the sound of a rattlesnake. So those two things, the head shape and the rattling of the tail, that isn't always a good indication of the type of snake that you're dealing with. And I understand when you think about looking at the bottom of the tail of a snake, you're not going to see that if you come upon a snake while you're out hiking. They're going to be laying on the ground and you won't be able to see that. And you may not even be close enough to see if there's a pit in the nose there, or if the pupil is vertical or round. And so honestly, the best way to identify the poisonous snakes in your area is to know their markings and some of their behavior. So in the Kentucky Snake book here, you'll see a picture here of a copperhead. And the markings to look for on a copperhead, one, the head, right here you'll notice is kind of copperish yellow color. But even quicker to notice than that is this dark band on the back of a copperhead. The dark band on the back of a copperhead is wide on the side and narrow in the middle. So if you were to look at it from above, it kind of looks like a bow tie or an hourglass. You see that here, wide on the side, narrow in the middle. Same thing here, here, and even if the band is broken and it's missing a part of it, it will still be wider on the side and narrower in the middle. There's a good one right there. And this insert picture here is of a juvenile copperhead. And you'll notice his head isn't very yellow, but the tip of his tail is. But most importantly, see that band? The band is still wide on the side and narrow in the middle. Same thing there. You see it there. All of these. There's a good one right there. Wide on the side, but narrow in the middle. And that's probably the most important thing to help you identify a copperhead. There's another snake in Kentucky that's harmless. It's called the northern water snake. And typically it's colored very similar to a copperhead. The head isn't yellow, but the body is often kind of a light gray or light brown with a darker band on it. But the big difference, the northern water snake, the dark band will be wide in the middle and narrow on the side. So if you see a snake with a band on across the back and it's wide in the middle and narrow on the side, that's a harmless water snake. But if it's shaped like a bow tie, wide on the side and narrow in the middle, that's a snake that you want to avoid. Copperheads don't like people, but more than likely they're going to run away from you unless they feel cornered or threatened in some kind of way. So the best thing to do is just simply to avoid them. On this next page, you can see the head of a copperhead and you can see that pit right there. But it's hard to see that when you're out in nature and the snake may be partially covered by grass or leaves or something like that. The cottonmouth, the western cottonmouth, is also found in Kentucky. Let me back up one page here and show you, this is the range of the copperhead. So we have them all throughout Kentucky. The western cottonmouth, however, you'll notice is just down here in the western part of the state. So people who live there need to especially know how to identify a cottonmouth. And cottonmouths have a dark body and it's a heavy, thick body. The young ones can look sort of similar to copperheads with some cross bands on their back, but that fades as they get older. And being just a dark, heavy body snake can make it a little bit harder to identify a copperhead as opposed to some other kind of harmless water snake. But one of the things that helps identify them is their behavior. When you come up upon a cottonmouth, they will stand their ground. They're not going to slip off into the water and run away from you like most water snakes will. They're going to coil up and stand their ground and open their mouth in a threat display, warning you to stay away from them. And when they do that, that's when you can see why they get the name that they have, because the inside of their mouth is white, like cotton. And this is a snake here that you definitely want to avoid, and give it a wide berth if you're out hiking or camping or canoeing. Don't pester it. Don't threaten it in any kind of way or agitate it. Another thing that will identify a cottonmouth as opposed to a harmless water snake has to do with the way that they swim in the water. The cottonmouth has a little scale over the top of its eye. And so when it swims in the water, it has to swim with its head up out of the water so that it can see better. A harmless water snake, they don't have that scale over their eyes, and so they swim with their head down flat on the water because they can see just fine that way. So if you see a snake swimming in the water and it's got its head up out of the water, then that is a copperhead, and that's a snake that you want to avoid. Here's a picture of a juvenile cottonmouth, and you can see how when they're young, it's got that yellowish tail and it's got these bands, that darker bands on its side. But as it gets older, like this one in this picture up here, it gets very dark and it's harder to see those bands when they're out in nature. So they'll, again, watch for cottonmouths based upon behavior. They'll stand their ground, they'll open their mouth, and it'll be white inside in a threatening way. And when they swim in the water, they swim with their head up out of the water. So that's the cottonmouth. And then, of course, there's the timber rattlesnake that we have in Kentucky, and you can see their range here. And so people who live in these areas will want to make sure they know how to identify a timber rattlesnake. And it again is a snake with a big, heavy body, and it has bands on its back, but they are typically V-shaped. See how this has a V in it right there? And this one has a V, and this one has a V. These snakes have a V in them, even when it's broken, like you see here. This snake has a V in the band there. And of course, you add to that they have the rattle on the tip of their tail. However, they don't rattle when they're alarmed. They like to be quiet and wait on their prey to get close enough to strike. So they tend to rattle only when you provoke them, when you get close to them and threaten them. Otherwise, they like to stay quiet. And so that's a timber rattlesnake, and that's what one looks like right there. And then the last one is the western pygmy rattlesnake. And you can see that's what it looks like there. And its behavior is very much similar to its cousin, the timber rattlesnake. But you can see their range here is pretty small. In fact, that's mostly right around the land between the lakes area and our two lakes, Lake Barkley and Lake Kentucky, out there in western Kentucky. And so those are some things that will help you to identify the poisonous snakes in Kentucky. Want to make one note about the coral snake. It's mentioned in the RA Campcraft manual because it is a poisonous snake, but we don't have any of those in Kentucky. But we do have these two snakes, the scarlet king snake and the scarlet snake. And they both have the same colors as the coral snake, red and black and yellow. But there's a big difference between the scarlet king snake, the scarlet snake, and then the poisonous coral snake. If you look at these two pictures, the red band is next to the black band. The red is always next to the black. You'll see that all the way around. Same thing here in the scarlet snake. The red is next to the black. In a coral snake, the venomous coral snake, the red is next to the yellow. And so if this was a picture of a coral snake, this red would be banded on either side by yellow, and then there would be black. And so a little rhyme that helps people remember that difference is this. Red and yellow kill a fellow. Red and black venom lack. So in our state, these two snakes you'll see occasionally, and you'll know that they're not poisonous because red and black venom lack. Now, if you travel out of state and go somewhere else where they do have coral snakes, you'll be able to identify them because the red will be next to the yellow. Red and yellow kill a fellow. So those are some things to help you identify poisonous snakes in Kentucky. And as I think about having this kind of knowledge and discerning between venomous and non-venomous snakes, I'm reminded that all snakes are part of God's creation. They all have a place. They all have a role in God's creation. Even the poisonous snakes are not inherently bad. They aren't out to get us. In fact, most of the time they're more afraid of us than we are of them. But we do need to know the difference between a harmless snake and a harmful poisonous snake so that we can stay safe in nature. Being able to identify them helps us to give them a wide berth. Now, I will give you one little tip. When you're out hiking and you come upon, say, a large rock in the path or a log that's laying across, a tree trunk that's laying across the path, it's always tempting to just simply, if you're able to, just reach out and step over that and step down on the other side of that tree trunk or that large rock. It's good advice not to do that, because if there is a snake on the other side where you can't see it, when you step across and you step down next to it, you've just trapped it between your foot and leg and that tree trunk. And there's a good likelihood that that snake will feel provoked and threatened and then will strike out at you. So one of the best things to do if you're hiking in the woods and you come up to a tree trunk across the trail or a large rock is to step up on top of it first so that you can look down and see if there's anything, a snake in particular, on the other side of that tree trunk or that rock. And that can help keep you safe as well, help you to say, oh, there's a poisonous snake. It's a timber rattlesnake or it's a copperhead. I can tell by the bow tie bands on the back. And so I'm going to back off and I'm going to make my way around and back to the trail through another way. And that way you stay safe, the snake stays safe, and we have good discernment when we're out in nature. And thinking about discernment also reminds us of our Bible story from back in the first week of this month. Jesus is at the home of Martha and Mary. He's teaching the people the word of God, and Mary was sitting there listening, and Martha was busy preparing a meal. And Martha complained to Jesus about Mary, complained that she wasn't helping with the work. And Jesus told Martha that she was worried about many things, but that one thing was truly needed, and that Mary had chosen that one thing. And Jesus wanted Martha to understand that even though preparing a meal was a good thing, hearing the word of God was the best thing. And this takes discernment, and this takes wisdom in order to know when God is calling us to slow down, take a step back from the work, and listen to what he is saying to us through his word. This can be hard to do sometimes because there is much to be done. Working, serving, doing, Those are good things. But taking time to stop and listen to Jesus speaking to us through the Word of God, that is the best thing. So, discernment. Have discernment in life, in knowing when to stop and listen to the Word of God, and have discernment in nature and knowing what these harmful poisonous snakes look like so that you can give them a wide berth and go around them and not threaten them, and you'll be safe when you're out hiking and camping in the woods. All right. Thanks for joining me for this Campcraft lesson, and God bless you, and we'll see you next week.